new report of United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is highly critical of Israel for its handling of incidents on the border with Lebanon on May 15th, Nakba Day. It concludes that the Israeli soldiers used disproportionate force against Lebanese demonstrators, which resulted in 7 deaths. The Secretary General's report mainly deals with the Nakba Day incidents, and in its conclusions, the Secretary General expresses concern about the IDF soldiers who used direct live fire against unarmed demonstrators who tried to breach the border fence. He called on the Lebanese army and the IDF to avoid such incidents from recurring. The report is based on the investigation findings of UNIFIL, which note that it was the Palestinian demonstrators who initiated the trouble, were first to use violence, and violated UN Secretary Council Resolution 1701. However, the majority of the report's criticism is directed at the IDF. Israeli and Turkish representatives are working against the clock in New York, trying to patch together a formula to end the Mavi Marmara affair before a July 7th deadline set for the issuing of a UN report on the incident that could potentially exacerbate tensions between the two countries. Diplomatic sources say this deadline has served as an impetus to both sides to try to find a formula amid concern that once the report is issued, it would be more difficult for Turkey or Israel to reconcile the matter. The Turks are demanding an Israeli apology and compensation to the victims, but Israel has said that while it was willing to pay compensation, as long as it was done in a way that would not open it up to future legal claims, it would not apologize. Rather, Jerusalem has said it would be willing to express regret for the loss of life. Netanyahu's decision to appoint Ya'alon as the Israeli representative to the talks is widely believed as having to do with domestic Israeli politics, being that if Ya'alon says that the formula was acceptable, then Netanyahu would be able to sell it to the cabinet and public. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian activists from around the world, though mainly from Europe, are expected to arrive at Ben Gurion International Airport on Friday. They say their aim is to visit Bethlehem and allow visitors into Palestinian villages where entry is restricted. Special status evaluation held Tuesday surveyed the various steps Jerusalem is treating the fly-in with a great deal of caution. Everyone here is in hysterics, sources in Jerusalem said when commenting on the preparation in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was briefed on preparations by the Internal Security Minister and Police Commissioner Wednesday. Activists landing at the Ben Gurion Airport will tour Jerusalem, Ramallah, Bethlehem, and the Jordan Valley as part of efforts to prevent damages to Israel's reputation in light of Friday's planned flight. A special operations room where the events will be monitored by the relevant officials will be established at Ben Gurion Airport Thursday night. The Israel Air Force targeted a terror cell in Gaza Tuesday after it was identified as attempting to fire projectiles at Israel. The pilots reported hitting their mark. A Palestinian medical source said 2 people were killed and 1 wounded in the strike, which took place east of Maghazi refugee camp. The sources said the 3 were hit while approaching the security fence in central Gaza, adding that the bodies were taken to the Gaza hospital. It is still unclear which militant organization the 3 were associated with. Military sources told Ynet that the cell was comprised of 5 individuals who were preparing to launch a rocket at Israel. This was the 3rd such event over the past 2 weeks, which the defense establishment believes indicated Hamas is allowing them. The IDF said any rocket fire on Israel or terror attack on Israeli targets would be met with a harsh response. Amnesty International released a report Tuesday night outlining what it considers the crimes against humanity committed by Bashar Assad's regime in Syria. The report focuses on events that occurred in Tel Khalaf when the mass protests began in March 2011. In the report, Amnesty states that Syria has closed its borders to organizations such as Amnesty International, as well as to international journalists and other independent observers. Amnesty International considers that the Syrian army and security forces committed crimes and other violations during the security operation in Tel Khalaf that, when taken in the context of other crimes and human rights violations elsewhere in Syria, amount to crimes against humanity. These crimes include murder, torture, arbitrary detention, and other severe deprivation of liberty, and other inhumane acts committed intentionally to cause great suffering or serious damage to mental or physical health. Amnesty International went on to add that it repeatedly urged the Syrian authorities to conduct thorough, prompt, and impartial investigations into crimes and human rights violations across the country. However, the Syrian authorities have failed and appear unwilling to do so.